So welcome. The purpose of the panel today is to discuss the issue of effectiveness. I'm joined by an esteemed panel. Incredibly excited to get into it. I'll let each of you introduce yourselves in turn, and if you do, or when you do, excuse me, if you could please answer like the main question, which is listed right there. What is the biggest driver of effectiveness? We could sort of start and just get your opinions on that and go off that. So Grace, please.
Hello, my name is Grace Letley. I head up strategy across the UK for iProspect. In terms of the answer to the question, I mean, obviously it's just one word, right? I've got two words, and I can expand on this now or later, but I think in the context of everything we're facing as media practitioners and clients as well, the huge amounts of fragmentation that we face really creates an awful lot of complexity around understanding the true nature of that challenge that you're operating at in a marketing sense, a holistic view of the customer, but even delivering that mass reach or recency is so much more complex to do in today's fragmented landscape than it ever was before. So integration and that holistic view across the piece is, I think, the biggest driver of effectiveness, accompanied by experimentation. And yeah, we'll get into that shortly. Fabulous.
Tom?
Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm Tom. I head up the econometrics team actually over at Sky. So yeah, I guess to answer the question from my perspective, probably the two things I'd call out. One is just about creative. I think at the moment we talk a lot about this kind of media effectiveness piece and how do we measure media effectiveness, and sometimes it feels a little bit disjointed from creative, and so I'd like to talk a little bit about that today as well. But also attention. It's been a bit of a buzzword today. We heard Simon from Dreams talking about it about an hour ago next door. But yeah, big one in terms of how do we increase effectiveness is really thinking about attention as well.
Karen?
So I'm Karen Stacey. I'm the CEO of Digital Cinema Media. And without already starting to agree with the panel, I think it is around, it's great creativity, but it has to be attention too. There's I'm sure a lot of you will know in the audience, a chap called Rich Kirk, who's created what he's called the right reach model. And he looks at what he calls attention, then persistence, which is in the right place at the right time, and then relevance. So you're really close to the relevant content and context. And he says that attention has twice the value of persistence, and persistence has twice the value of relevance, in that order. And I think that's really interesting, sort of to break it down so it's not one measurement fits all.
And Venya?
Hi, I'm Venya, and I head up strategy and planning at Brainlabs, which is a digital-first agency. So I think my answer is, apart from agreeing with the esteemed panel, obviously, I think I'll also agree creative is one of the biggest drivers. And the reason I say that is because at Brainlabs we obviously deal primarily with kind of digital media, and that's increasingly becoming automated. And in that world of automation, creative is the critical lever that you can use. And actually it's less about targeting, it's less about context, because you pretty much have a black box that you feed everything into, and creative and data are the two kind of levers you have. So creative, I think, is going to become more and more important. It has always been, but I guess the way we think about it in a digital world is changing.
So attention came up quickly, Tom, Karen. I believe when I've spoken to all of you previously that attention was something that was a common topic, and as Tom mentioned, it's been spoken about today already. But Tom, could you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, how important or influential is measuring for attention becoming in terms of effectiveness, and how linked are those two necessarily that we know of currently?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about what we're doing at Sky. I am conscious that there is the great measurement debate happening next door, so, and I'm talking about econometrics, so we may have some of the measurement experts over there. But I guess from a Sky perspective, we've come to the realisation that actually not all of our impressions, not all of our impact, not all of our views are equal. And you can hit lots of impressions very, very cheaply in certain platforms, but actually it's expensive to hit some of the impressions that really matter. So we've been working with a company called Lumen to overlay attention data on top of our media reporting metrics, and then feed that through into our econometric models, so that all of our econometrics measurement now comes with that layer of attention over the top. It's not something that we've kind of achieved yet. It's something that we're working through today, and something that we're hoping to get. But kind of feeding that level of insight into our econometric model, so that naturally all of your kind of your raw data has that overlay, is going to be really, really important for Sky.
And Karen, you mentioned this as well. I mean, big screen in a cinema, hard to compete against that in terms of attention, especially when you tell people to turn off your phones before the film. Can you speak a little bit more towards the importance of that metric for you, especially in relation to other metrics that you might measure effectiveness by?
Yeah, so we've been doing some work and doing that, sort of going back and sort of said, if we were starting again, so if cinema advertising didn't exist and we brought it into the marketplace tomorrow, what would we be saying? And obviously the fact that we have got this amazing big screen, we've got unique content, we've got people paying to go in there, we've got all the metrics that you would want, that it's brand safe, the audience data the day after, understanding that how much attention they're paying is some of the work we've also done with Lumen, and 80% of a 30-second and 60-second ad is actively watched when you're in the cinema. So just thinking about that and thinking about the impact of that, and then the role that we can play within any kind of Markov's plan is really important, and being really clear about the contribution you're making, I think, is really helpful for brands and obviously the agencies and the media practitioners. Because I think there's a lot of claiming that everyone can do everything, which is obviously just not true.
And I think that's a brilliant thing about where we're getting to now with the attention economy work. So we, like Sky, have been working with Lumen at Dentsu for a number of years now, and you kind of get the first round of research that came out a few years ago, and it says the greater the attention on an advert, the greater the recall, and the greater the likelihood of brand choice. And you kind of think, hooray, and then you think, we probably kind of knew that already. A little bit like, in the frame of your question, we kind of know that cinema is going to have a wonderful amount of attention on its ads. But as we now kind of go beyond that space, and we're baking it into our tools here at Dentsu, and you are as well at Sky, to be able to start quantifying that and making choices at the top end with, channel planning, sort of our multi-channel planning tool that we have, CCS. We've now integrated in those attention findings, so we can optimize plans across a number of different channels and understand not just what the claimed attentive reach is, but actually with that reach, that attention outcome data baked into it. And then at the very sharp end, where it gets very interesting, we are now optimizing with our digital partners and with our social platforms as well. We're able to take that attention data through to the measurement and the activation, so we're buying in a way that is optimizing to that attention. So as we kind of move beyond the initial this is the research, and it's reassuring because it does reaffirm what actually, when we kind of step away from all the tools and everything as humans and planners, kind of know actually a lot of where you need to be, why you're paying a premium in certain environments, and where it's important to turn up for your brand. But now we can start quantifying it, which I think, as that sort of paper attention and probably the attention inflation that we're going to keep seeing as that competition for our attention and eyeballs increases, being able to quantify it is actually going to be really, really important.
And of course, anything that's attention grabbing is probably going to have a great deal to do with the creative involved in whatever the advertisement is, so not just the context, right? Venya, you mentioned how important creative is. Can you elaborate a little bit about that within the context of people paying attention to an advertisement, how effective that perhaps makes an advertisement?
I mean, it's super important, and I know this is not a new thing around creating the right creative for the right context is super important. But I think the more going back to the automation plan, going back to kind of the faster moving creative that is going to need to kind of be developed, the more onus I think on the media planners. Of course, I'm going to say that because I'm a media planner, but I think it's a really exciting time for media planners to lead kind of the charge and helping kind of creative agencies and production agencies navigate that, because the type of creator that works in that kind of faster moving spaces where actually not all attention isn't equal, right? So how you kind of have those high attention environments, but also ones where, they're kind of lower attention, where actually frequency and recency is more important, and kind of layering that messaging and planning those journeys that kind of consumers are going through. So it is a lot more complex, but it's also, I think, super exciting because we have more tech available to help us navigate that. But I think as planners, our job is to really understand what is the insight, what are we kind of helping those creative agencies kind of navigate and create creative that kind of works in those multiple different contexts.
We were chatting earlier, weren't we, about the because I was sort of saying that I think you've got classic creative and then you've got this new name of effective creative. And effective creative seems to live in the digital world a bit more. So how effective can you be when you're quicker, when you've got less seconds, when you're not doing the overall storytelling? And it felt, again, instinctively that you can use more effective creative or shorter creative if you're an established brand, because people already recognise you and know you, and so you could probably be. But when you're new, but then Venya told me some new data that I didn't know today.
Yeah, it's a stat from Google Messy Middle kind of analysis, I think about a year ago, about across multiple different categories. They showed consumers a fictional brand and kind of an established brand, and actually more than 50% across multiple different categories picked the fictional brand. So I don't know, the hypothesis could be actually there is less brand loyalty maybe in digital environments. And your if you see, sample size of one right now, I'm scrolling through Instagram, I will buy from a brand I've never heard before, more and more and more. So
we just wondered if there was a price point on that. Are you more likely to buy something that is a lower price point, and actually there's more trust on brands that are using television or outdoor or cinema, because the consumer assumes that you must be well established because that's surely a more expensive medium. So I think all that comes to play when you're thinking about what platforms to use as a media planner as well.
And from the media owner perspective, different types of media lend themselves perhaps better to certain types of advertisements or certain types of brands, as you sort of mentioned. Karen, can you talk about a little bit more and elaborate a little bit more about how different media owners should perhaps be treating
Yeah, I think it's, and obviously being on the media owner side all my career, I think it's really important for media owners to be really clear about what they're good at. And I think we've got to a place, what we're saying now within, and talking about cinema, is that we are really good actually at driving 1+ cover for a young audience, which I think we've always seen as the incremental bit. And actually, that's where we play really well. We play really well at new product launch because we move the metrics that count, when you're re-evaluating a brand and when you've got a new campaign. So, and that's what we really feel proud about hanging our hat on. And I think, especially in a world where we saw Kantar speaking earlier about the cost of living crisis and the people making choices, I think for brands, be really sure about what your metrics are on these campaigns. Because there's so many people who've got a view on a campaign, and if you're not really clear about their objectives, you can't brief the media owners, who are the gateways to your audiences, to be really clear about what you're trying to do. And so many times I've been in meetings where we seem to have ticked boxes, and it could be anything from TV, radio, that we think we've done a great campaign, and then, oh, actually, that wasn't what we were trying to move the metrics on. Or the finance director didn't think that was the metrics we were trying to move. So I think that's really, especially at the moment, I think it's really, really important.
Tom or Grace, do you have any thoughts? I mean, we did just see, as you mentioned, Kantar showing how consumers are reacting to the cost of living crisis. I mean, I suppose a positive to take away is that people are more willing to eat out less than drop Netflix or other streaming services, Sky, for example.
Lots of good for you, McDonald's.
Do you have any thoughts on how to create increased effectiveness during a time like this?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, Sky might have done better than McDonald's over the kind of cost of living crisis potentially, but then again, we are a premium brand, and people do see our brand as a bit of a luxury sometimes. So we have definitely seen an impact, and our CFO is more than ever is really, really keen to measure the effectiveness of our advertising. And we've had to prove out not just that kind of our performance advertising works in that kind of like, yes, we run a Black Friday offer and support that in media, and that delivers a short-term response, which is kind of the easy end of the argument. We really had to protect our kind of like our brand investment, and we've done that by kind of proving out the long-term impact of our advertising. Looking at the full funnel analysis, how do we drive some of those brand metrics, but not just how do we drive them, how do we kind of nest that through into sales? And so when you're sat in that boardroom with that CFO, you can show some science, or you can prove out that today, the sales that you're seeing come through for Sky today are a direct result of the advertising that we had in market 1, 2, even 3 years ago. And if you start to drop that advertising now, in maybe in 1, 2 years' time, we are going to see a financial material impact from that. And so it's more than ever at the moment, when there's really, really high levels of scrutiny on your budgets as a result of the financial crisis, we're being asked to prove out that our performance and our brand marketing is working.
Grace, could you speak a little bit more toward the short-term versus the long-term vision that brands are struggling perhaps right now in trying to balance?
Yeah, so I think when navigating these kinds of times, knowing that inflation is going up for your audience, for consumers, also in media as well, which is putting increased pressure on those marketing budgets, the two things you need to be looking at is, what is the experience for your customer? How are they weathering the cost of living crisis? Because it's not affecting everyone equally, and it's not just purely a matter of income. It's also a matter of attitude to spending. So we've conducted some cost of living segmentations, and what that shows to us is that there are some that, even though the cost of everything is going up, they have amassed, quite an amount of savings through the lockdowns that we experienced, and an increased kind of sense of, I just need to make the most of life right now, because they're slightly scarred by that lockdown time. And so even though things are getting more expensive, they're willing to just keep spending and enjoying life on those certain treats and perks, and what they look like will differ by audience. Of course, there are people that are completely the other end of the scale who are forcibly having to pull back, and absolutely aren't going to be sort of increasing any discretionary spend. So you need to understand what's going on with your consumer, and not kind of take that, socio-demographic kind of ABC1 approach. It's not that simple. We've played around with looking into that actually, and a lot of your AB audience are on the end of actually struggling to make ends meet, and are very much not in the YOLO space. So it's important to be led by the customer. Is your customer likely to be able to spend on your brand? And then think about the type of business that you're in. Is it one that is a treat that people will be continuing to enjoy and afford themselves, or actually is really it's going to be a postponable or an expendable? So the types of categories where people cease to spend for a portion of time. And of course you need to weigh that up in the context of your business pressures and what is going on. And we absolutely have to be very judicious with how marketing budgets are spent through this time. As you said, there's increased pressure to show that it is paying back. Cash flow is a very important thing for businesses. But of course it can be an opportunity if you're in a business where you're able to invest for that longer term and grow that share of voice that you have. And yours is a category where the share of voice and share of market correlates. You really can make great strides and gains, not just in the period, but also coming out the other side of it as well. And there have been many, many studies to that effect. But there's a wonderful quote that McKinsey used from the racing car driver Senna, saying that you can't overtake 15 cars on a dry day, but you can when it's raining. And I think that is the attitude, that if you happen to have those different elements come together and align to mean that strategically it is the right thing to do to invest, you will accelerate out the other side of this recession and can make really great gains as a business.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I mean, a lot of people see it as a challenging environment that we have to fight for more budget, but it's also a massive opportunity. If your competitors are starting to pull back because of the environment you're in, it's also an opportunity for you to go harder, build that share of voice, as you say, and actually grow, coming out really, really strong. And as you say, there's loads of studies that have shown that.
And it seems like, so far at least, a lot of companies are following that type of advice. Marketing spend is predicted to remain a bit higher than perhaps one might have thought when we first went into this sort of cost of living crisis. So we'll have to keep checking in on additional bellwethers to see how that actually pans out. But I think,
and that's great, right? It means people are following the science. It means that these sorts of conferences are having a job and people are actually listening to us. That's great.
Yeah. And I guess being aware of the flip side as well, that if you are a business that is going to be more cautionary and even pull back, then that others may overtake, others may make the most of that.
I think also our media practice is changing wholesale across all of media. So like small AV deadlines, you can do things much faster, quicker everywhere. Plays into that benefit of having this flexibility of it's working, let's keep going. Where before it was very much more, you've got to plan, 3 months out, and then you've got to lay it down, and then you've got to get your copy ready. And so we're much more fleet of foot, I think, as an industry, which will help brands to be able to react to that too. It's not just like in one area that you can play fast and quickly.
And that's so important, isn't it? The ongoing experimentation around what is working and what isn't. Because even if you have data that shows how your communications investment has then driven your business outcomes, take some of our clients during the pandemic, they were faced with store closures, stock delivery issues, higher rate of delivery cost, all these different things. So actually that is a number of different factors operating on your business dynamics that are going to have ultimately an impact on whether orders are fulfilled. So ultimately the ROI of that media. So the ability to test, learn, understand what works and adapt rapidly, because so much is changing so quickly all the time, is really, really key.
I think the one thing I'd add is what I've seen with clients in the last kind of 18 months is definitely more of a performance mindset being applied to brand as well, because actually, they're having, to your point, having to defend to the CFO why that brand investment should stay there. So we're seeing a real shift on our more brand-led clients actually adopting more of that testing-led approach, but also having to prove out through things like incrementality testing and more agile versions of econometrics to be able to kind of show actually, yes, my brand spend is delivering X today, but will also deliver Y tomorrow. So it's definitely as kind of a planner, that kind of brand performance kind of, I suppose the dimensions are really being blurred in terms of the methodology and the way you plan. Those two things are actually becoming quite similar.
That's good news as well, though, isn't it? Because they are completely joined.
Yeah.
The stronger the brand, the quicker the performance. Yeah. So it feels like we put this line down the middle, which was never there, and we've sort of just realised it to sort of say you do need both. And even when you're doing great brand advertising, guess what? You get a performance in response too.
Karen, when we talked previously, I think you said something to the effect of sometimes we turn advertising into a diagnostic and an operation, and the illusion being that maybe we should turn away from that a little bit, or at least question that. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that might mean?
I think it's very much what Grace was saying about just stand back a bit and think about what we're trying to achieve overall and thinking about the objectives. I think we went very much into the being obsessed by the pipes rather than the output of what we're trying to achieve. And I think we have moved away from that a bit more now, or being really critical of, our own experience of advertising, where you might think, God, I'm seeing that ad again, I'm seeing that again, there's too much of it. And it's us doing that. So we're just not taking ourselves outside of what we're doing into being objective about our work rather than subjective. And I think the media practitioner's work is really hard. it's a real skill. And sometimes I think we, put ourselves at the bottom of a pile when into some sort of transactional that a computer can do, and it just can't. Good campaigns cannot be bought, I believe, by a computer. It's about understanding the gaps between the data and how you make that work for clients. And again, from a media owner point of view as well, understanding what you're bringing to the party and how you can make a difference. And I think we should be a bit heads up and a bit prouder of the work we do that makes not only customers and businesses better, but also, without being too evangelical about it, but also can change the world. And I think we should be really proud of our work, like lawyers are, like the accountants are that work in these businesses. We're a professional services provider. And so that's what, anyway, I'll kick that soapbox underneath my feet.
On that point though, Venya, you did mention how AI is kind of playing into the role in which you plan. I'm curious, we have a few minutes to very briefly, of course, it's a huge subject. Could you talk us through a little bit about, it might not replace humans, or maybe it shouldn't, but it can still be useful.
Yeah, definitely. It's a super interesting topic, and I think I think ultimately I agree with Karen. The role of the media planner is actually more critical in a world of more automation, because actually what it does let us do is it allows you more time to spend making those strategic decisions and less time on kind of menial, repeatable tasks. So kind of going back to the point around, creative and data being the two most critical levers in kind of some of the automated solutions like PMax, like Advantage Plus that's available today. You're, as the role of the media planner, you're the creative strategist and the data strategist, and it's what you feed that is, powers what the results are. So I think it's more critical, and actually I think we'll find in the next kind of 4 or 5 years more cross-channel planning, more strategic, more data strategic type of skill sets becoming more important in agencies, and having to kind of invest in helping the people kind of get more upstream, and for the automation to do more of the downstream, I think. That's where we're going to go.
I know we have just a few minutes left. Are there any questions in the audience for the panel? Yep, I'll come with the mic here.
Just on that point, really. So do you reckon what you mentioned about data and automation in that space could also be happening with creative later down the line? So a computer can't make a campaign yet, because ultimately the creative process is, absorbing information throughout life and then applying that to a specific campaign in the creative's mind. But is there a reason a computer couldn't do that?
I mean, we've probably all seen versions of AI created images. I think kind of the best use case I've seen so far is more from a concepting point of view. It allows you to get to quicker concepts at pace, and so the role of the creative is kind of, you have kind of a sort of a blackboard of ideas that you can start from, so it makes that process quicker. Whether that'll kind of get more sophisticated, I would probably say yes, but I think that's a challenge in our role as kind of practitioners to figure out, how do we make the AI do what we need it to do, but still have that kind of role for the practitioner, essentially.
Any other questions? Yep.
Thank you. So I guess just a question around creative, because I think you all alluded to that being a key factor within effectiveness. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is how you influence those conversations on creative to drive performance and outcomes, because I think I've got metrics like net memorability, impact, but how do you link that to actual outcomes to make sure people do the right things?
I can answer from a Sky perspective. So at Sky we work with a company called System One, who I'm sure many of you are kind of familiar with, to look at the emotional intensity of our adverts, and actually then we nest that through econometrics. I'm really keen on the kind of that we don't separate media effectiveness and media performance from creative success. And that there is a certain part of creative success which is unquantifiable. But actually, System 1 have done a really good job of kind of measuring the performance of creative through the level of the emotional response that the campaigns deliver, and then we can nest that through into our econometrics to say, the better the creative, the more kind of emotive it is, the more it's eliciting a response from people who are seeing it. Ultimately, the better it's going to be, the better it's going to perform, the stronger return on investment it's going to deliver as well.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of the System 1 sort of methodology and approach, and the more, again, that we can quantify and track this, I think it really does help build the case for it. So in the attention space, that's another element of some of the research and the technology that we've pioneered. We can now do testing of creative prior, because, to your point, grabbing attention with creative is like, a huge factor in whether you gain that attention. So using eye tracking and also then actually AI combined with performance modeling, we can pre-test whether a creative is optimally designed for that environment. And I think in a sort of a step back sense, that's the thing that I get most excited about from a media practitioner point of view in driving creativity. It's working closely with creative agencies to make sure that we are designing creative that's fit for the role of that channel. And it's the role of channels is evolving all the time based on how consumers are using them. So we can be guilty as an industry of kind of lumping social together as this one thing, but you've got Pinterest as a search engine and TikTok as like a VOD platform, and how platforms and those different social pieces, the fact that other people are there just make all of these experiences much nicer, but it's not actually necessarily the reason that people are flocking there in the first place. So helping creative be designed to fulfill the role, I think, is a huge job of ours as practitioners.
And sometimes you just don't know, do you? You just don't. You can do all the testing and it looks like it's going to be great and it isn't, and vice versa. Hence Mario Kart's the biggest film of the year so far, and the critics think it's terrible. So I just think sometimes you just got to try it with the consumers.
I think that's a really great way to end it. Go see Mario Kart.
Absolutely.
Mario movie, Chris Pratt. Anyway, thank you guys so much for dropping in. Panel, let's have a round of applause. So you guys are now welcome to go get